The weight of the stars. Last night of silence, first day of command. Chapter 1. The Quiet Orbit. Ed Mercer sat alone in the dark, the city humming faintly beneath him like a machine that had forgotten how to sleep. Streetlights glittered like scattered jewels, but his gaze kept climbing higher, past the skyline, past the cloud line, into the black ocean of stars. They burned without urgency, without care. Their indifference felt like the sharpest truth in the room. On the table behind him lay the envelope. He didn't need to open it. He knew every word printed inside. Captain Ed Mercer, USS Orville. A title he had once chased like oxygen. A title that now felt heavier than gravity. He pressed his forehead to the window. Breath fogged the glass. "So, tell me," he whispered, voice hoarse from hours of unused sound. "Am I speaking to the void? Or are you listening through all this quiet like a promise you never deployed?" The stars didn't answer. They never had. They just burned, ancient, endless, as if their only purpose was to remind him how small he was. A breath of laughter escaped him, brittle enough to crack in the middle. He used to pretend that sound meant progress, meant healing, but every dawn had proven him wrong. Divorce papers, missed promotions. The echo of a life he once believed was meant for greatness. He had grown used to shrinking, to the idea that maybe that was what he was built for. His eyes drifted back to the envelope. His fingers hovered, curled, fell into fists. A bourbon glass on the counter caught a shard of starlight. He pushed it away. He wasn't chasing numbness tonight. He wanted clarity, something sharp enough to cut through the fog inside him. He sank into a chair, elbows on knees, head in his hands. The silence pressed in close. It didn't feel cruel this time. It felt honest. The universe wasn't going to carve a path for him. It wasn't going to tell him he mattered. Maybe that was the point. Slowly Ed lifted his head. His eyes found the stars again, framed by glass and city glow. When he spoke, his voice had steadied into something like reverence. He stood. The envelope waited like a doorway he had been afraid to touch. He broke the seal, not to read the words, but to claim them. His breath filled him deeper than it had in months. The weight inside him shifted, incrementally, unmistakably. Tomorrow, he would step onto a bridge and call himself captain. Tomorrow, he would meet a crew who had never seen him fall apart. Tomorrow, he would glow. Not because the stars had granted permission, but because he had finally granted it to himself. He looked out at the night one last time. The stars burned on, silent and vast. A faint smile edged across his face. Chapter 2. The Weight of the Uniform. Morning arrived like a reluctant guest, pale light spilling across the apartment floor as if unsure it was welcome. Ed hadn't slept. Maybe an hour, maybe less. The envelope lay open on the table, its contents arranged like a quiet verdict. Captain Ed Mercer, USS Orville. Sharp. Clean. Mercilessly real. He dressed slowly, tugging on a jacket that felt too formal for the man he'd been the night before. The bourbon glass still waited where he'd left it, untouched since midnight. He let it stay there, an artifact of a life he was trying to outgrow. Outside, Union headquarters towered above the city. Glass and steel caught the morning light, shimmering like possibility, like a promise he didn't know how to hold. He stepped through the doors with measured breath, the hum of activity rising around him. Officers in crisp uniforms, cadets with bright eyes, and futures unbroken. He remembered being one of them, certain, ambitious, before the fractures, before the fallout. The clerk barely glanced up when she handed him a garment bag. "Congratulations, Captain Mercer." Routine tone, no ceremony, no context for the gravity in his chest. The word captain hit him like a weight. He managed a nod, a smile thin as paper, and walked on. The uniform inside was pristine, folded with surgical precision. He unzipped the garment bag slowly, fingertips grazing the fabric. It felt heavier than it should, not in weight, but in implication. Every thread tethered to a question. Are you ready? Are you enough? He slipped into the jacket. The fit was perfect. It still didn't feel like it belonged to him. A polished glass wall caught his reflection. A man stood there, smaller than the title on his collar, dwarfed by the years behind him. The city stretched out beyond the glass, indifferent as the stars had been the night before. Ed's throat tightened. He thought of the hearings, the reprimands, the nights spent wondering if the peak of his life had already passed. He thought of Kelly, of silence like a scar, failure etched into bone. He closed his eyes and inhaled. Not small anymore. The words trembled as they formed, but they were his. And that had to be enough for now. When he opened his eyes, the reflection hadn't changed. But something inside him had shifted, almost imperceptibly. A recalibration. A beginning. He squared his shoulders, adjusted the collar, turned to leave, and froze. Because for a heartbeat, the brushed steel wall in front of him wasn't just a reflection. It was a memory. Kelly's hands on his collar, years ago, smoothing the fabric before a briefing. Her voice, low, teasing, and warm. Straight lines, Mercer. You always look more captain when the lines are straight. The echo hit him so hard he swayed. He blinked, and the memory held. Kelly's laugh, the little crease beside her mouth, the confidence she had always worn like armor, the way she used to stand close enough that his pulse forgot its rhythm, the way he once believed she'd be beside him for every promotion, every horizon, every sunrise seen from a viewport. Then the memory broke. The reflection was just him again. He exhaled through his nose, steady but shaking. Straight lines, he murmured. Right. His hand drifted to the place on his collar where hers once rested. For a second, he let the grief be real. Not a failure, not a punchline. Just a scar the light couldn't quite erase. Then, softly, half prayer, half joke, with a humor that cracked like glass. God, he muttered. I hope she's not on the Orville. He squared his shoulders again, sharper this time, not small anymore. Then he walked toward the shuttle bay. Chapter 3. The First Step. The shuttle bay smelled faintly of ozone and polished steel, the scent of beginnings. Ed paused at the edge of the platform, uniform stiff across his shoulders, garment bag slung over him like a weight he hadn't learned how to set down. Engines hummed in the air, low, reserved, like the heartbeat of something larger than any one person. Something alive. A pilot glanced up from her console as he approached. Captain Mercer? She said, voice bright with practiced professionalism. Congratulations, sir. The Orville's a fine ship. Ed smiled. It felt like a gesture borrowed from a version of himself who hadn't fractured yet. Thanks, he murmured, stepping aboard. The hatch sealed behind him with a hiss like a chapter closing. The shuttle lifted. The city fell away. First a skyline, then a scatter of lights, then nothing but a memory clinging to the curve of the planet. Ed watched, hands clasped loosely in his lap. He had imagined this ascent 1,000 times. Back when ambition was breath. Back when failure was a rumor he didn't answer to. Space unfolded in the viewport, a slow unfurling, a curtain drawn back. Stars spilled across the dark, burning without urgency, without permission, without the slightest obligation to answer him. The universe offered nothing but its vastness. And maybe that was an answer. Docking in 5 minutes, Captain, the pilot said, breaking the quiet. She's a beauty. You'll see. Ed nodded. His pulse quickened. Then, there. The Orville emerged from the dark, a gleaming silhouette, silver hull catching the starlight like it belonged to it. Sleek lines, curved symmetry, Union emblem glimmering like a star that had learned intention. The ship wasn't just a vessel, it was possibility in metal. It was a threshold. For a moment, awe eclipsed doubt. This was his ship, his command, his chance. He leaned forward, eyes locked on the Orville as it filled the viewport, growing until it felt close enough to touch. Something in him shifted. Not certainty, not confidence, but the first ghost of it. A spark. A whisper. The shuttle angled toward the docking bay, aligning with the glow of guiding beacons. Ed straightened his shoulders. Tomorrow had arrived, and it waited for him. In silver and starlight, the Orville was waiting. So was the version of himself he hadn't met yet. Chapter 4. The Bridge of Strangers. The docking bay doors yawned open like the mouth of something ancient and patient. The shuttle glided forward, engines humming low, until the Orville filled the viewport completely. Sleek, silver, and impossibly alive against the black canvas of space. Ed's breath caught. For a moment, awe drowned out everything else. The doubts, the ghosts, the uniform pressing against his shoulders like a verdict. The landing was smooth, almost ceremonial. The hatch hissed open, and the scent of polished metal and recycled air greeted him like a memory from a life he lost track of. Ed stepped down slowly, boots striking the deck, with a sound that felt louder than it should. Each step was a declaration. I'm here. I'm doing this. The corridor stretched ahead, bright, clean, nearly too quiet. He moved forward, heart pounding in a rhythm that contradicted the calm of his face. Officers passed him, nodding with polite acknowledgement. They didn't know who he was yet. Not really. They only knew the title stitched to his uniform. About halfway to the fridge, a figure pushed off the wall near the corridor intersection, as if he'd been waiting exactly this long. Gordon Malloy. Same restless stance, same uneven grin, same gravity Ed hadn't realized he'd missed. He straightened, not saluting. Gordon had never trusted formality to communicate anything worth hearing. Instead, "Captain Mercer," he said, tone deliberately official. Then the mask cracked. Man, you're really doing it. Ed stopped just long enough to absorb it. No turning back now. Gordon walked toward him, hands shoved in his pockets like the ship was already home. You picked me, he said, not bragging, just acknowledging the truth. You could have gone with someone photogenic, you know? Someone who doesn't have a history of crash-landing social events. Ed's response surfaced without hesitation. I didn't need photogenic. He met Gordon's eyes. I needed you. And there it was. The beat that anchored the hallway. Not sentiment, recognition. Gordon's grin softened into something steadier. Well, I'll try not to hit anything expensive. No promises? Ed asked. I mean, define expensive, Gordon shot back. They walked the rest of the way together. Not touching, not talking, just sharing air that didn't feel as thin. At the ridge doors, Gordon slowed. He didn't step aside. Just enough back that Ed could go first, without feeling pushed or alone. The doors parted, warm light spilled out, golden, almost theatrical. Screens flickered with star maps. The viewport stretched wide, framing starlight like a cathedral window. The tall officer at the helm turned, posture crisp. Captain Mercer, welcome aboard, sir. Ed nodded, voice steady. Thank you, it's good to be here. Introductions blurred. Lieutenant John Lamar, Navigator. Dr. Claire Finn, Chief Medical Officer. Isaac, Science and Engineering. Others whose names he would learn with time, not memory tricks. Gordon moved to the helm with an easy confidence, like he belonged there in a way Ed hoped to someday belong, in the chair waiting at the center of the room. When the formalities ended, Ed approached the captain's chair. It felt like a horizon with armrests. He sat. The bridge hum wrapped around him. Engines, systems, the heartbeat of the ship. The view beyond the glass was endless, and for once the endlessness didn't feel like accusation. It felt like room. room to be more than the man who fell apart, room to build something out of the pieces. The Orville's engines thrummed deeper. Maybe a coincidence. Maybe not. Gordon glanced back from the helm, just once. A silent check-in, a lifeline disguised as routine. Ed didn't look away. For the first time since everything fell apart, he didn't feel like reclaiming his life was a delusion. For the first time in years, he felt like command wasn't the end of him. It might be the beginning. Chapter 5. Silence and Fire. The Orville's hum was softer at night, a low vibration that felt almost like breathing. Ed sat alone in his quarters, lights dimmed to a warm glow that barely touched the edges of the room. His uniform hung neatly over a chair, weight set down for now, replaced by something lighter. Something he hadn't felt in years. He leaned back, staring at the viewport. Space stretched endlessly beyond the glass, stars scattered like embers across a black sea. They burned without urgency, without care, just as they had last night. But tonight, the silence didn't feel like judgment. It felt like possibility. Ed exhaled, letting the day replay in fragments. The docking bay, the first step onto the bridge, the tremor in his voice when he said, "Thank you, it's good to be here." The faces of strangers who would become something more. He had smiled, spoken, commanded. He had done what was expected. But beneath it all, a question threaded through him like a pulse. Am I enough? The question didn't land like a wound this time. It landed like breath, uncertain, but necessary. He closed his eyes and listened. The hum of the ship moved through the walls, through the floor, through him, steady, alive, patient. It wasn't an answer. Maybe answers were a myth. Maybe all the universe ever offered was space to try, to fail, to learn to rise. He opened his eyes again, and the stars were still there, waiting. "You never promised I was chosen," he whispered. "Never claimed I had a role. You just kept on being endless while I tried to find my soul." The words didn't ache now. They felt like acknowledgement, a truth he could stand in without flinching. His gaze drifted to the uniform. The blue shoulders caught what little light existed, as if memory lingered in fabric. He thought of Gordon at the helm, posture relaxed, eyes alert, pretending not to double-check every approach vector, like the universe might be judging them on precision. Safety, not dependence, not rescue. Just a room in the universe where Ed didn't have to defend his existence. He stood and crossed to the viewport, pressed his palm to the glass. Stars burned on, silent and vast. Reflections catching in his eyes like distant bonfires. The spark inside him, the one that flickered in the apartment, layered on the shuttle, brightened on the bridge, rose again. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just real. The hum of the Orville deepened, a note lower, warmer, like a heartbeat syncing with his. It could have been coincidence. Ed chose not to believe that. His smile came slowly, unforced. A smile that belonged to him now. Not to the man who needed permission to shine. Tomorrow they would fly. Tomorrow the silence would stretch wider. He would meet it head on, not as someone asking to matter, but as someone who already did. Even if only privately. Even if only just beginning. Ed turned from the window, letting the dark cradle the light in him instead of smother it. Tomorrow he would try again. And for the first time in years, Ed Mercer believed himself capable of becoming. Epilogue. Fire in the silence. The Orville floated in the docking bay like a silver dream suspended in black. Ed stood on the bridge, the hum of systems thrumming beneath his boots, the viewport framing a universe that stretched beyond imagination. The crew moved with quiet efficiency, voices low, hands steady. They were ready. He wasn't sure if he was, but maybe readiness wasn't a feeling. Maybe it was a choice. Clear for departure, the helmsman said, fingers dancing across the console with the same restless confidence Ed had seen for years. Gordon didn't look back. He didn't need to. The seat between them was filled with history, enough to bridge any silence. Ed nodded, his voice calm when he spoke, though his pulse was a storm. Take us out. The ship shuddered softly, then glided forward, leaving the safety of the bay behind. The stars opened like a door, vast and silent, and the Orville slipped through, as if it had always belonged there, as if it had been waiting. Pressure in the air changed, subtle but real, like the ship took a breath with him. Ed stepped closer to the viewport, watching the black swallow the last trace of home. The stars burned on, indifferent as ever. But tonight their silence didn't feel empty. It felt like room. Room to grow. Room to matter. Room to become. Behind him, stations beeped. Boots crossed the deck. Someone laughed quietly at the console. Life moved. The universe did not freeze for his transformation. It never had. It never would. And that was the point. Ed lowered his voice, letting the words belong to the quiet, not to the room. If the stars are made of fire, I am too. No one turned at the sound. No music swelled. No revelation rippled across the ship. Just the hum of engines, the soft percussion of the bridge breathing as one, and the feeling new and terrifying and holy that becoming didn't need witnesses to be real. The Orville surged into the endless dark, engines glowing like embers against the void. The stars stretched wide. The silence welcomed them, and for the first time in years, Ed Mercer felt the fire inside him burn bright enough to answer the silence. Not in defiance, not in apology, but in recognition. Somewhere behind him, Gordon murmured, almost to himself. Looks good out there. Ed didn't look away from the stars. It does, he said. And for now, that was enough.